The Harrowing of Flight 979. By David Hall. 25.04.2025. Chapter List. 1. Clear skies, no survivors. 2. The Black Hour. 3. Ashes in the cabin. 4. The pilots who fell from heaven. 5. The final broadcast. 6. Legacy of the Rift. Summary: Flight 979 departs New York for the United Kingdom under perfect conditions. Midway through its transatlantic journey, the aircraft disappears from radar without warning, slipping silently into a rift in time. For 1 hour in GMT, it ceases to exist in our reality. When the plane reappears and lands on autopilot, it's a slaughterhouse in the sky, riddled with World War II-era bullet holes, blood-slicked seats, and dead passengers torn apart by unthinkable forces. The cockpit is blasted open, and the pilots are missing. Investigators are horrified to find ballistics from the 1940s embedded in bodies. Forensics match the damage to dogfight patterns from the Second World War. The horrifying truth unfolds: Flight 979 was thrown back to 1944 and mistaken for an enemy craft by Luftwaffe fighters. But what happened inside the plane defies reason. A recovered video burst shows impossible spatial distortions, reality warping, and a glimpse of something watching from beyond the veil. The missing pilots are found far from the crash site, dead, mangled, and ritualistically violated in ways no human could have orchestrated. As investigators dig deeper, they uncover a buried British wartime project called Operation Tesseract, designed to explore and manipulate time. And they learn this is not the first aircraft that vanished, nor will it be the last. From ancient folklore to unsealed bunkers, the pattern becomes clear: every few years, the sky splits open and demands tribute. Flight 979 was just one of many. And the rift is still hungry. Chapter 1, Departure. The departure gate at JFK buzzed with the usual drone of a red-eye flight. Flight 979 was boarding for Heathrow. Businessmen glanced at emails. Parents corralled kids. The engines of the sleek Boeing 787 Dreamliner gleamed beneath the floodlights of the tarmac, reflecting the haze of distant thunderclouds. Captain Ray Morrison stood at the foot of the gangway, exchanging perfunctory smiles with the boarding crew. He was a 20-year veteran of the skies, cool-tempered, with a poker face etched into sun-leathered skin. His co-pilot, Ellie Park, younger, sharper, with something to prove, followed behind him, clutching her flight binder. "Smooth ride all the way," Ray muttered. "Jetstream stable. Not even a hiccup until we hit British airspace." "You just jinxed it," Ellie replied, tapping wood on the cabin wall. She grinned. The passengers funneled in, 247 souls in total. A screaming toddler already clawed at his mother's neck. A priest took his seat by the window, murmuring Latin from a pocket Bible. 2 college-aged tourists argued over the superiority of Coke versus Pepsi. Life was ordinary. Unaware. Cabin crew sealed the doors at 10:06 p.m. Flight attendants went through the motions. Safety briefing. Buckles clicked. Phones into airplane mode. No one listened. No one ever did. Pushback commenced. The cockpit lit up in quiet oranges and greens as Ray flipped switches. Fuel pressure, normal. Hydraulic systems, green. Navigation system, locked in. The autopilot purred, a sleeping beast beneath layers of code. "Tower, this is Flight 979, requesting clearance for takeoff." "Cleared for takeoff, 979. Runway 13R. Engines roared. The jet surged forward, tires kissing asphalt at 180 miles per hour. Passengers were pinned to their seats, a slight groan of inertia washing over them. And then airborne. The city dropped away beneath them, lights flickering like dying stars. By 10:47 p.m., they reached cruising altitude 36,000 feet. The jet leveled. The seat belt signs flicked off. A gentle ding. Drinks began to roll down the aisle. Vodka tonics, ginger ales, tomato juice. The toddler wailed again. A man in 17C popped a sleeping pill. Outside, night stretched like ink. The Atlantic Ocean glittered below under a crescent moon. But something about the moonlight seemed refracted. Odd. As if reality had a wrinkle. In the cockpit, Ellie frowned. "Ray, are we getting a flicker in the NAV?" Ray glanced at the screen. Just a hiccup. The navigation path distorted briefly, then corrected. Nothing unusual, not uncommon at high altitudes. He shook his head. Probably a transponder burp. Oceanic handoffs always a little rough. "I don't like the timing," Ellie murmured, staring at the instruments. "You don't like turbulence either." She didn't reply. Down in the cabin, a sudden static hiccup through the intercom. A few passengers looked up. Flight attendant Myra checked her panel. Everything read normal. She pressed the button to re-engage the music channel. It hissed, then cleared. "Something's off," she whispered to herself. And then it came. A hum. Subtle at first, like a note held just out of earshot. But it grew. Not mechanical. Not wind. Not human. Something deeper. A resonance in the bones. Teeth chattered with no cause. Several passengers looked around, bewildered. Someone vomited without warning. A woman shrieked, clawing at her ears. Blood trickled from one nostril. Ray and Ellie heard it too through the reinforced cockpit glass. The hum was inside them now. Ellie's hands trembled over the yoke. "Ray, what the hell is that?" I don't know. Instruments are," he blinked. "They're fine. Everything is green." Outside, the stars blinked out. One by one. As though a curtain was being drawn across the sky. And then, white. A flash like a magnesium flare exploded outside the cabin. The entire plane was bathed in blinding light. Time seemed to pause. The engines didn't fail, but they stuttered, ever so slightly, a hiccup in a heartbeat. The passengers screamed. Not in fear, but in uncomprehending terror. A little girl in row 12 was bleeding from both eyes, her pupils dilated to full black moons. A businessman's hands locked around the armrests, fingers snapping with unnatural force. And then, silence. Total, absolute, crushing silence. The stars returned. But not the same stars. The constellations were wrong. Orion tilted at a strange angle. There was no North Star. Ray's hands were gripping the yoke in a white-knuckle grip. "Ellie. I see it." The altimeter was dropping fast. The navigation was dead. The transponder read a year code. 1944. Ellie whispered, "That's not possible." The hum returned. And somewhere, far below, the sky lit up in fire. Chapter 2, Vanishing Point. The first to notice something wrong on the ground was a junior radar technician at Scottish Control. Her name was Eliza Monroe, and she had 3 hours left in her shift when Flight 979 disappeared. 1 second, the plane's transponder code BA979 glowed steady on the screen. The next, it vanished. No fade. No loss of altitude. Just gone. As if swallowed by the air itself. She blinked. Tapped the glass. Then checked the secondary radar. Nothing. "Eliza," her supervisor called, "You all right?" She stared at the screen. Flight 979's just vanished. Vanished how? Like, it blipped out. No warning. He walked over, sipping lukewarm coffee. That's not possible. International flights don't just disappear. You probably lost a sweep. It's not a sweep, she snapped. I've got everything else. That plane's just gone. The supervisor leaned in, now frowning. They both watched in silence. No signal. No emergency beacon. No altitude drop. Not even an anomaly in velocity. As though 979 had flown off the face of the Earth. Across the Atlantic, Heathrow's controllers confirmed the same, they'd lost contact at 3:12 GMT. A full emergency protocol was declared. RAF bases were alerted. The Coast Guard scrambled. Flight paths were rerouted. Panic hadn't reached the public yet, but the systems behind the scenes were igniting like brush fire. On board Flight 979, no one could hear any of that. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere had turned feral. Lights flickered overhead with a nauseating strobe. One moment bright, then too dim, then painfully brilliant. The hum had resolved into a howl not mechanical, but celestial, as though the cosmos itself was screaming. A young man tried to call out, only for his voice to catch in his throat. Blood poured from his mouth in great ropes. He gagged and collapsed across the aisle. A woman tried to rise and tripped, landing face first on the armrest in front of her with a sickening crunch, her nose exploding in a shower of cartilage and crimson. People began to bleed from their pores. Subdermal capillaries burst like overinflated balloons. Eyes reddened, then burst. One child was fused to their seat by a mix of vomit, blood, and sweat, face locked in an expression of paralyzed terror, jaw open but silent, like a scream frozen in amber. In the cockpit, Ray and Ellie were hyperventilating. "We're not, this isn't turbulence, this is space-time tearing, Jesus Christ," Ellie's voice cracked. Her hands danced over useless controls. The autopilot light blinked. The fuel gauges twitched. A shudder ripped through the jet. Then came the light again, pure white, blinding, thick. Like a fog made of photons. Outside, visibility vanished. A wall of whiteness surrounded them. Not cloud. Not mist. Something else. A pulsing ocean of light. Ellie reached for the radio. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday Flight 979er, we've lost everything, coordinates unknown, we're descending, engines are stable but..." A shriek of static drowned her out, then silence. And then, a pop. The stars returned different still. The moon hung impossibly large, its surface pockmarked and too close. Below them, land was visible, but it wasn't London. Not the glowing sprawl of modern civilization. It was rural. Dark. Speckled with the sparse orange of 1940s incandescent lighting. No highways. No electric sprawl. A flash to starboard followed by a sharp, concussive thump. Missile lock. Miss, what the hell? No missile locks in 1944, Ray gasped. 3 more flashes, thwump thwump thwump, each ripping into the side of the jet. The fuselage peeled like paper. Oxygen masks dropped, trailing crimson ribbons. Passengers screamed as bodies were sliced open by shrapnel and hot steel. The hull groaned like a dying animal. Outside, twin-prop Messerschmitt Bf 109 swarmed like sharks. Their gunfire began in short bursts, but with increasing aggression. They didn't understand what they were seeing. A jet with no propellers. No response. Alien. American markings, yes, but no wingspan they recognized. No shape they could name. So they attacked. .50 caliber rounds tore into the undercarriage. The landing gear compartment burst open in a cascade of twisted metal. The tail took a direct hit, 3 rows of passengers incinerated in a flash. One child's body was flung from the hole like a rag doll, vanishing into the cold air. The cockpit was next. A burst of cannon fire struck the left side of the windshield, exploding it in a storm of jagged plexiglass. Ellie was hit first. Her skull exploded backward like a burst pumpkin. One eye socket gone, her face shredded, jaw hanging from sinew. Blood sprayed the instrument panel in wide arcs. Ray reached for her, too late, as another round tore into the control panel, igniting sparks and smoke. The pressure drop did the rest. The cockpit opened to the sky. Ray was flung out screaming, arms windmilling, eyes wide, his body sucked into the freezing sky. His limbs flailed once. Twice. Then bent backward at the knees as his spine snapped. His body tumbled through the stratosphere like a discarded puppet. Inside the cabin, chaos. Fire. Smoke. Screams turned to gurgles. People writhed in pools of their own fluids. The fuselage listed left. Oxygen masks swung like nooses. And the sky kept burning. Flight 979 was dying, its screams written in blood and bullet holes. And no one on Earth had the faintest clue it was happening. Chapter 3, Through the Rift. At 4:08 GMT, an object appeared on radar. RAF Flyingdals was the first to catch it, an unregistered blip moving at high speed from the Atlantic into UK airspace. No transponder. No known flight path. Civilian frequencies were silent. They assumed it was a ghost signal, maybe a weather anomaly. Until it began descending. Less than 60 seconds later, Heathrow reported the same. A foreign object. Rapid descent. No comms. No IFF signature. It was Flight 979, returning from hell. The Dreamliner emerged from low cloud cover over Suffolk, dropping fast, trailing smoke. The jet's right engine sputtered, coughing fire with each cycle. Its fuselage was riddled with holes, some fresh, still weeping vapor trails from punctured hydraulics. The tail was shredded. The wings scarred. The windshield was gone. The cockpit was open to the air. Inside, the controls sparked and sizzled in the soft blue glow of early morning. No one sat at the helm. Blood smeared the seats, drying in strange patterns. And yet, the autopilot had taken over. The Dreamliner didn't crash. It landed. Tires screeched against tarmac as the jet touched down on Heathrow's runway 9L. Emergency crews were already en route, watching in horror as a ghost ship rolled in from the mist, engines failing, metal buckling, sparks jumping from the undercarriage. The jet taxied to a slow halt. Silence. The moment ground crew opened the cabin door, they started screaming. The stench hit them first, hot copper, feces, and scorched flesh. A low, putrid fog clung to the seats, thick with death. Lights flickered. Panels sparked. The aisle was soaked in blood, so much blood it ran like a river down the gentle incline of the cabin, pooling near the forward galley. The first responder slipped and fell into it. His face went pale. He vomited. Bodies lay twisted in unnatural positions. Faces blown open. Chests torn apart by shrapnel. A man's skull was crushed completely, as if stomped by a boot. One passenger was hanging by her seat belt from the overhead compartment, her spine bent backward so severely her rib cage had cracked open like a blooming flower. A child, no older than 7, sat in 14B, eyes open. His entire left side had been burned down to pink pulp. Half his face was gone, teeth bared in a final rictus. A melted plastic tablet was fused into his hands. None of the bodies looked peaceful. Every corpse was contorted in fear or agony, mouths open in soundless howls, fingers clawing at seat cushions, skin slashed, punctured, flayed. Rows 17 through 21 were gone completely. Just twisted metal, dangling oxygen lines, and blackened seats. Blood dripped from the ceiling. One steward had been embedded in the wall like meat in a press. His rib cage had split wide open, lungs spilled onto the floor in loops. Another's face was missing entirely, just a smooth plain of blood and broken cartilage where his eyes and nose should have been. Someone had tried to write something in the fogged-over window with their last breath. 3 bloody letters. HEL. And then the message trailed off. Flight 979 was a flying mausoleum. Investigators flooded in. Military cordoned the area within the hour. No press was allowed close. Ballistics teams began retrieving fragments, casing, slivers, embedded metal. What they found set off alarms at the highest levels of government. Every bullet, every shell fragment, was dated 1944. Steel jackets, lead cores, wartime stamps. The exact munitions used by Luftwaffe fighters during World War II. Ballistics matched rounds stored in RAF museums. Impossible. Back in the cockpit, black box technicians recovered the CVR, the cockpit voice recorder. It was intact. They played it once. It began normal. Routine chatter. Coordinates. Weather. Then the static. The hum. Screaming. Ellie's voice begging for direction. Ray shouting something about bright light and wrong stars. Then bursts loud, percussive, like thunderclaps. Gunfire. The sound of the cockpit exploding was unmistakable. Then just wind. Whistling. And at the very end, a child's voice. A soft, wet whisper. Don't look outside. Then it cut out. That evening, buried deep within the British National Archives, a document was unearthed. It was yellowed, almost forgotten, printed on wartime paper. A military intelligence report from June 14, 1944. Topic: Aerial anomaly witnessed by RAF 303 Squadron. Status: classified, unexplained. According to the file, during an engagement with German bombers over southern England, 2 British Spitfires witnessed a large, silver aircraft unlike any known bomber or cargo plane, flying at impossible speed and altitude. The report said it bore American markings, but had no visible propellers. The object did not engage, the pilot had written. It vanished into the clouds after approximately 1 hour. The report had been dismissed. Mass hysteria. Pilot fatigue. Now, 81 years later, it had a name, Flight 979. And its passengers had brought death with them from the past. Chapter 4, Aftermath. The air hangar at Heathrow had never known such silence. 32 forensic pathologists worked under halogen floodlights, clad in triple-layered PPE. The tarmac had been cleared and tented over with military precision. The Dreamliner sat like a beast carcass, mangled and inert, bleeding its last hydraulic fluids into the concrete below. Inside, every inch reeked of char, copper, and rot. Blood had dried into a crust along the interior. The cabin temperature held steady at a deathly chill, despite the generators. Nobody spoke unless they had to. Dr. Ishan Katrai, a veteran medical examiner of 30 years, walked down the aisle with trembling hands and a clipboard that kept smearing with blood each time he took notes. He'd seen what IEDs did to human bodies. What firebombs did to civilians. This was worse. In row 11, he found a woman missing her jaw. It had been torn off entirely. Her tongue lay across her neck like a fat pink slug. One of her eyes had liquefied and oozed down her cheek, while the other bulged, distended, and yellow. Her fingers were broken, crushed, most likely, while clawing at the seat in front of her. He made a note. Cause of death: catastrophic facial trauma, blunt force and puncture. Likely premortem. In the lavatory, a body was melted into the toilet bowl. Skin fused to plastic. The back of the head was caved in, either from the impact of rapid decompression or more likely the jagged shrapnel embedded in the scalp. Teeth floated in the bowl, bobbing in a pink slurry of blood and waste. 2 aisles over, a child had been burned so thoroughly that bones poked through the charred meat of his legs. The smell was unforgettable, sugary, sickening. What remained of his arms were wrapped tightly around a stuffed rabbit, half the fur singed off, one glass eye missing. Further back, a man was seated calmly. Upright. Belted in. No visible wounds. Until they tilted his head forward and found the entry hole small, neat just under the left ear. The exit wound had detonated the right side of his face. Brain matter had sprayed across the window like hot oatmeal. A steel-jacketed 13mm bullet was later pulled from the wall behind his seat, warped and streaked with gray matter. It matched Luftwaffe munitions exactly. Back in the command tent, military brass argued over next steps. No one could explain how a modern aircraft had returned in this condition. A half-dozen international treaties were violated just by its presence. Civilian deaths on this scale required explanation. Preferably one that wouldn't cause mass hysteria. But there were too many questions. Too many witnesses. And then there was the issue of the pilots. They were gone. The cockpit had no remains. No blood that could be conclusively tied to Ray or Ellie. The glass had shattered inward, yes, and there was blood but none with corresponding organs or tissue that matched their genetic profiles. It was as though they'd been taken. More than that, the controls showed an impossible truth: the autopilot had been disengaged during the descent. Someone or something had landed the plane. The discovery sparked a firestorm in secure circles. Intelligence officers cross-referenced every available document, every wartime report. That's when they found it. A clipping from the Shropshire Sentinel, dated June 15, 1944. Ghost plane in dogfight skies. RAF pilots today reported a strange, silver aircraft spotted during aerial combat over southern England. Witnesses described it as enormous, otherworldly, and bearing American military insignia. Flight officer Richard Gates was quoted saying, "It looked like something from 50 years in the future. No propellers. Just this sleek flying beast. We didn't engage it, it didn't fire. The Jerrys tried." That's when the sky lit up. The mystery aircraft disappeared into cloud cover. The Ministry of Information has refused comment. The clipping had been dismissed as tabloid fiction. But now the photo, grainy and overexposed, showed a distinct silhouette, wide body, swept wings, engine pods. The unmistakable shape of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Back in the hangar, techs ran diagnostics on the black box and flight systems. At 3:16 GMT, something anomalous had occurred, a 48-second loop in time. The same second, repeating 48 times, back to back. The jet had frozen in air for nearly a minute according to instruments. To the passengers, it must have felt like eternity. One technician played a secondary loop from an internal cabin cam, grainy and static covered, half melted by heat exposure. For exactly 3 frames, there was a visual anomaly. Outside the window where clouds should be was a shape. Humanoid? Not a fighter. Not a bird. A black figure, gliding alongside the aircraft at Mach speed, watching. Then gone. They checked again. Frame by frame. Enhanced. Stabilized. The shape had no wings. Its arms were spread like crucifixion. Its eyes glowed. Chapter 5, The Final Broadcast. Inside the digital forensics bunker, 8 stories beneath the Ministry of Defense, engineers huddled around a flickering screen like monks over sacred parchment. The footage had been recovered from an auxiliary broadcast relay, an emergency transponder buried deep in the jet's avionics. It wasn't supposed to record video. But in the final seconds before Flight 979 disappeared from real space, it had captured a single transmission burst. 1 second of footage. Frame by frame. They enhanced the signal using edge filters and image interpolation. The resulting video was only 9 frames long, each lasting a fraction of a second. But it was enough to give everyone in the room nightmares. Frame 1, a peaceful cabin. Passengers asleep. The gentle glow of night lights. Frame 2, a blinding white flash like a detonation without sound. Frame 3, every screen on board, even personal tablets, goes black. Frame 4, the cabin changes. The lighting is wrong. Off color. Seats twist in strange angles. A black mist seeps through the air vents like fingers reaching out. Frame 5, passengers begin to move not out of fear, but as if pulled. Bodies stretch unnaturally, like gravity has shifted sideways. One woman is bent 90 degrees at the waist, her spine visibly cracking. Frame 6, a tear opens in the air near seat 18C. Not a fire. A hole like reality itself ripping apart. Through it, something looks back. A face. Or what might have once been one. Blurred, black, half skeletal, with eyes like cinders. Frame 7, carnage. Blood sprays midair. The roof of the cabin has begun to peel open. One passenger is already outside the plane, impossibly, dangling in midair, screaming silently, her lungs torn open and frothing red. Frame 8, the face appears again. Close to the camera. Inches away. Too close. You can hear it breathe. Frame 9, blackness. The last frame was corrupted. Replaced with a burst of sound data that defied classification. Experts ran it through every audio program available. There were voices layered in it. Hundreds. Crying. Begging. And over them all music. A broken, jittery melody. Like a radio playing a Glenn Miller tune backwards through meat. One technician passed out listening to it. Another clawed at her ears until she bled. The recording was sealed and marked, D-class anomaly. Meanwhile, the media demanded answers. But there were none. The world knew something had happened. Families of the victims held vigils, but none were allowed to see the bodies. Not a single funeral was held with open caskets. Closed, sealed, and buried under military orders. A press release stated the incident was due to unexpected decompression and rare meteorological phenomena. Nobody believed it. Then the nightmare deepened. 2 days after the incident, forensic teams in Wiltshire began examining the remains of the pilots recovered from a remote field, a location 70 kilometers from the flight path. Their chutes had deployed. But the bodies weren't whole. Captain Ray Ellis was found in a tree, tangled in branches, his torso snapped backward, bent double like a hinge. His skull was missing. Not exploded. Gone. The spinal column ended in a clean cut at the C1 vertebra. Ellie Jackson was found in a nearby pond. Her body was bloated, riddled with bruises and burns, but her mouth. It was stuffed with cloth. Her own uniform shirt, torn into strips and forced down her throat so deeply it tore her esophagus. Her lungs were filled with pond water, but her throat showed signs of vocal cord rupture, as if she had been screaming underwater. Next to her body was a torn flight logbook. Most pages were ruined. But one entry remained. Asterisk, the sky cracked like glass. Engines dead. They're outside the plane. Watching us. I saw my mother in the clouds. She was mouthing my name, but her eyes weren't hers. Asterisk. In the final act of the investigation, a special unit reviewed declassified wartime transmissions from Luftwaffe intercepts. One German pilot's radio chatter survived, picked up by triangulated listening stations. Asterisk, engaging unknown bomber. No return fire. Speed is unreal. It's not flying, it's sliding through the air like a shadow. I hit the nose. Glass exploded. I see them, passengers inside. Screaming. No uniforms. Children. What have we done? Asterisk. The transmission ended with a burst of static. He was never seen again. By week's end, the jet was dismantled and quietly destroyed. Every bullet, every scrap of metal, taken to undisclosed bunkers. And yet, somewhere, pieces remain. A scorched seat belt buckle. A melted tray table. A fragment of fuselage engraved with a number, 979. Sometimes, late at night, air traffic controllers at RAF Breise Norton report a signal. A ghost ping. Unregistered. Always at 36,000 feet. Moving west, toward the Atlantic. No transponder. No ID. Just a whisper across radar, and then it's gone. Chapter 6, Legacy of the Rift. The storm came without warning. No satellite caught it. No weather system tracked it. One moment the sky above the North Atlantic was clear, stars like glitter dust scattered across black velvet. The next, clouds erupted from nothing, roiling into existence like smoke in reverse. Flight 2265, a cargo hauler from Nova Scotia to Belgium, was the only aircraft in the zone. The crew radioed ground control with increasing panic, winds buffeting the hull, ice crawling across windows at unnatural speeds. The clouds above them didn't swirl. They twitched, like something enormous was pressing fingers against the skin of the world from the other side. Then, the scream. It wasn't from the crew. It wasn't human. Ground control caught it for 0.8 seconds, a raw, tortured shriek in the radio frequency spectrum. Sound that wasn't meant to travel through air. It crashed their systems. One operator bled from the ears. Another had a seizure on the spot. By the time radar rebooted, Flight 2265 was gone. Back in England, beneath an abandoned chapel on the outskirts of Worcestershire, a private military excavation had resumed. They were digging into something hidden since 1945, an unmarked bunker built into the chalk hills. Wartime records listed it as a communications relay. It was no such thing. The bunker walls were lined with sigils etched in acid, carved in blood. Old runes, overlapping like circuitry. The corridor floors were warped, scorched in semicircles, as though something had burst through. At the center of the structure, deep below the surface, they found it. A chamber with a single steel door, blackened shut. The seal read: Operation Tesseract, Deep Temporal Anomaly, do not open. They opened it anyway. Inside was a shriveled corpse in a flight uniform, fingers fused to a melted typewriter keyboard. The name tag had rusted off, but the armband was unmistakable: RAF 617 Squadron. In his lap was a torn notebook, ink soaked into the paper like dried blood. The final page read: Asterisk, it came from the sky. It sang to us. A song made of time and teeth. We answered. Asterisk. Next to the notebook was a glass tube containing a piece of wreckage, stamped with the number 979. In modern London, a journalist named Harriet Vale sat at her desk, rereading the forbidden clipping from 1944 for the 100th time. She'd received it anonymously, no return address, postmarked from New Mexico. She didn't believe in ghosts. But she believed in patterns. And every 44 months, like clockwork, an aircraft disappeared over the North Atlantic. Civilian, military, didn't matter. Always the same, short burst of static, then silence. Some came back. Most didn't. She traced the pattern further back, pre-flight records. Airships. Gliders. Even ancient folklore from the Hebrides, tales of sky vessels that would descend during thunderstorms, spill screaming passengers into the sea, and vanish in mist. Storm ships, they called them. Flying coffins. 3 months later, a salvage team in Greenland unearthed a chunk of metal frozen in permafrost. It had rivets. American titanium. A serial number. N791ZA, the original Boeing 787 prototype. Except that aircraft had never flown. It had been decommissioned, stripped, and recycled in 2009. This one had been shot to hell. The inside was lined with blood. Dried handprints. Scraps of skin still nailed to the interior by frozen bone fragments. And in the cockpit, untouched by time or frost, was a voice recorder. They played it once. It began with a sound like wind. Then static. Then a slow, rising hum like the warming of a throat. Then we saw them. But they weren't ours. And they never wanted to be. Then screaming. Unending. The wreck was sealed in concrete and sunk into the sea. The official report said it was experimental debris. That's what they always said. But now, beneath the Atlantic, there are dozens of them. Jetliners turned to crypts. Every one marked by bullet holes that don't rust, by blood that never washes away, by teeth still lodged in metal like offerings to something ancient. And sometimes, late at night, on high-band aviation frequencies, pilots report hearing a strange, mournful tone. Like music. Soft. Hypnotic. Coming from nowhere. Coming from everywhere. They call it the rift lullaby. And when they hear it, they know. They're not alone in the sky. They never were. The end.